My parents turned down my proposal on New Year's Eve, stating, "You don't deserve to carry the family name, and my brother should marry first." So, I cut them off and moved on until years later. A confession in the hospital explained why I was only kept alive. Hey, Reddit. My parents made it quite clear that I was the backup kid when I was a kid. I didn't fight it. I basically made my own life and left. I assumed that was the end of it. It turns out they had other things to do. I need to start from the beginning before I get into all that. Hey, I'm Joey. I'm 23 years old. I work full-time, keep my head down, pay my bills, and don't ask my folks for anything. My brother Ross is my identical twin. Only the papers are the same. Our faces looked the same, but our builds didn't. If you seen how we were treated as kids, you wouldn't have guessed we lived in the same house. Ross is taller than me, bulkier, and more athletic. He's the kind of guy that adults naturally slap on the back. He was a favorite of the teachers. He was a favorite of the coaches. Walter and Lizzie, my parents, made him the center of their lives from a young age. He was more than just their son. They put money into him. I was the extra thing that came with the bundle. I am not shy or quiet. Not ever. I saw things early on, and I didn't pretend I didn't. My folks didn't like it when I used comedy to make things better. They like silence and following orders. They said my attitude was hard to deal with. Ross didn't have a bad attitude. Ross had promise. We grew up in the same room, which made the contrast impossible to overlook. Two lives in the same room. The window was on Ross's side, which let in more light and air. He had a new desk, drawers that didn't stay together, and shelves that weren't bending in the middle. When a poster ripped or peeled, it was replaced. It was strange how a device always ended up on his side of the room. I got my clothes from other people. A dresser with a drawer that never closed all the way. Old paint with scratches that were never fixed. It stayed broken if something broke. No one ever stated that was the rule. It just happened. You could see it well from the door. Proof in the form of physical evidence of who mattered more. Without uttering a word, Lizzie made things worse. She caressed Ross as if she was happy to be with him. Put your hand on their shoulder. Before school, he straightened his collar. Little things that indicated, this one is mine. When I touched him, he would merely correct me and draw me away from a conversation. Putting 2 fingers on my arm to make me stop talking. A hand on my chest to keep me from moving forward. I don't remember her giving me a hug. I remember her changing me. Walter wasn't very subtle either. Ross was always thinking about the future. Sports were about getting money for school. Friends were about making relationships. If Ross made a mistake, it was just part of growing up. It showed that I wasn't created right if I did the same thing. I didn't cry about it. I didn't ask. I said things. Short and dry. Things like, I guess my side of the room didn't qualify for the upgrade. Lizzie would generally give me a look and tell me to stop being dramatic. Ross would sometimes smirk, but not in a mean way. He was a kid who was getting good care. He didn't ask because why would he? The birthday dinners were the worst since they acted like they were neutral. Same candles, same table, identical speeches for both celebrations. One year, we're all seated there with family from both sides when the cake comes out. Frosting in white with blue accents. Ross' name is written clearly and boldly in the middle. It's just Ross. No room left, no time to fix things, no time to think. The room is quiet for half a second, which is long enough for everyone to notice. I stare at the cake, then at my parents, and then back to the cake. I add, I guess I'm sharing his wish this year, just enough to acknowledge reality. Lizzie snaps back right away and urges me to quit being theatrical. It's just a cake, he says. Some family members giggle in that awkward way individuals do when they don't want to choose a side. Ross looks at his plate. No one fixes it. We still eat the cake. That was my childhood. No explosions. Just 1,000 little things to remind me of where I stood. Not long after that, I saw Lizzie looking at me in a way that wasn't how she usually looked at me when she was mad. It wasn't rage. It wasn't a letdown. It was something more snug. Maybe fear or guilt. It only took her a second to see me staring back. Then her face got hard, and she told me to quit hovering and get to work. At the time, I didn't know what to do with that face, but I recalled it. I started working early, not because they made me, but because money signified power. It meant I could get transportation without having to ask for them and clothes without having to explain why I needed them. My own space. Ross didn't need that. Things came to him without him having to do anything. A couple years later. I'm 17 and on purpose. I'm out of the house more and spending less time there. In my last year of high school, I was already working more hours than I was sleeping. I went to a tiny bakery near my work one afternoon. I just needed something quick before I went home. That's when I first met Trinity. She was behind the counter with a flower on her arm and her hair pushed back like she'd been working all day. I said that the display looked too amazing to be true. She snapped back that it was okay as long as I didn't ask for suggestions and then not follow them. No flirtation, no awkwardness, just regular. I paid, she gave me the bag, and for once, I wasn't being compared to someone else. There was no comparison or rating, simply a conversation that stayed where it was. I left thinking how bizarre it was to be treated like a real person without having to earn it. Football was the main thing in our house, not only for fun or as a hobby. It was the center of everything. Game days were the basis for fall schedules. Dinner times were set up around practice. If a highlight reel was coming on, conversations would conclude early. You weren't really part of the family if you didn't know Ross' position, stats, or upcoming game. Ross was a linebacker. He was a huge kid who was fast and noisy on the field. He was a favorite of the coaches. Walter lived for it. He learnt the rules late and then acted like he was the one who made the game up. Every time he won, it showed that he was being a good dad. The referee or a faulty call was to blame for every loss. He wore the same clothes as the rest of the team. He said he was Ross's dad more often than he said his own name. Ross always had help. New cleats every season, extra summer camps, and private lessons when a coach thought he could do better. Walter was always there early for every game, making noise and pacing the sidelines like he worked there. Lizzie made sure Ross' jersey was clean and prepared food for the whole team. They complimented effort, toughness, and leadership, which are all things that only appear to apply to one son. I didn't play soccer. I attempted it once, but I was put in a position I didn't care about, and I quickly understood that the sport itself wasn't the objective. I quit without making a scene. That didn't mean I stopped working out. I ran in the mornings before school, worked weights at a cheap gym after work, and acquired discipline without anybody watching. I didn't ask for rides or goods. I bought what I needed. I made do without it. That was how I did things. I ran in smaller races, neighborhood runs, and amateur meets. There weren't any crowds or cheer sections at these events. I gave my parents the dates once, and they said they'd see. No, they didn't. Not even once. No texts, no apologies, just nothing. Later, people asked how Ross performed during practice. There was a clear difference. The house was full of life when Ross played. The house kept the same when I was busy. I stopped telling them. It wasn't pride. It was effective. Reminding those who don't care is a waste of time. Walter never asked me about my training. He wanted to know if Ross had eaten enough protein. He wanted to know if Ross's coach had called back. He wanted to know if Ross was sure about the upcoming game. I didn't think about my job, my schedule, or my objectives. Lizzie was calmer, but not always better. I would stretch in the driveway or run drills in the backyard and feel like people were watching me. I'd look up and see her observing me from the kitchen window. At those times, her expression never revealed that she was happy or angry. It was different. She looked tense and like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. The second I saw, Mom would turn away or tell me to quit pacing holes in the grass. Trinity knew about an event I had on a Saturday. Earlier in the week, she had asked in a casual way, as if it weren't a huge problem. I told her she didn't have to come. She came anyhow, sat on the bleachers with a cup of coffee, and watched. There were no people in the stands. There was no Walter pacing, no Lizzie taking pictures, just her, a few strangers, and the sound of shoes on the street. She didn't say anything right away after we got back to the car. "Why do they always skip this stuff?" she said. I shrugged. The same maneuver I had mastered over the years. They have a lot to do. She didn't fight or try to make her feel better. She just nodded like she understood what busy meant in that situation. That was what she was like. She saw patterns and didn't try to hide it. When Ross got home, he started talking about practice. Walter paid attention. Lizzie asked things. I went to my room and stretched without saying a word. I didn't hate Ross for it. The home regulations made me angry. Sports weren't about working together or getting better there. They were money, position, and proof. So, I kept training without anyone seeing me. I got stronger without being praised. I learned early on that it was better to be quiet than to be disappointed, and that discipline didn't need anyone else to work. The next 4 years went by in a flurry of changes and syllabi. I didn't go through college easily. There was no simple way to go, no safety net, and no time when things seemed easy. I dealt with it the same way I deal with everything else in my life. I kept my head down, didn't whine, and didn't expect anyone to help me if I fell. Every semester, I have a full class load. I took on as many part-time jobs as I could handle. At times, 2 at once. Waking up early in the morning, before the light came up. Late nights that ended with me eating whatever was quick and cheap. Weeks ran together. Get up. Do your job. Class. Do your work again. Sleep. Do it again. I didn't inform my parents when things were tough. Not because I was trying to hide it, but because they never asked. They didn't ask me about tests, due dates, or if I was getting burned out. I didn't need people to clap for me anyway. Applause doesn't pay for school. I had to get the degree. That was the whole objective. Trinity was the only thing that stayed the same through it all. She didn't think of my timetable as something that needed fixing. She didn't talk to me like a coach before a game or give me lectures. There were no conditions on her being in my life. Coffee is waiting for you before your early tests. There was food in the fridge when I got home late and didn't have the energy to talk. A simple "Are you okay?" that didn't need a long answer or a show. She agreed with me when I said yes. She didn't freak out when I said no. That stability was more important than any kind of support. It was meant to be a neutral day on graduation day. That's what I thought. Space for the public. There are too many people around for anything strange to happen. There were caps and gowns all over the place. Families sat close together on metal chairs that groaned as people moved. I thought it would be awkward and quiet at worst, maybe a touch tense. I didn't think my folks would be that deliberate when they had an audience. We got to our seats early. Ross was already posing for shots with Walter and Lizzie a few seats ahead of me. Walter's arm was tightly wrapped around Ross's shoulders, as if he thought someone may rip him away at the last minute. Lizzie kept repairing Ross's dress, smoothing out wrinkles that weren't there and fixing the cap that didn't require fixing. She seemed proud in a manner that she never did while she was with me. I was there with Trinity, watching it unfold. I didn't get involved. I didn't have to. I already knew what was going to happen next. The ceremony itself took place in parts. Names were called. Applause that comes and goes in waves. People cheered louder for some names than for others. The clapping around us increased louder when Ross's name was read. As soon as Trinity read mine, she clapped. Ross also clapped. I watched him turn halfway and look around the crowd for our parents. They clapped, but it seemed like they were doing it late, like they remembered they were supposed to. The yard quickly filled up when it was over. There were cameras everywhere and balloons floating above. Parents hugging their kids like they hadn't seen them in a long time. Walter waved us over and told us to come with him to the parking lot. He stated it in such way that meant he had something planned and wanted people to hear it. Ross was the first to arrive. Walter stopped next to a gleaming black Mustang that was parked by the curb. Brand fresh, clean, and impossible to overlook. He pulled out the keys from his pocket and threw them to Ross. Loud and planned. He said, "You earned it," as if he were announcing a scholarship win. People around us turned. Some of Ross's old teammates cheered. Someone made a whistling sound. People took out their phones right away. Lizzie gripped Ross tightly and quickly, as if they had practiced this moment down to the last second. Ross laughed, surprised but pleased, holding the keys like he wasn't sure if they were real. After that, Walter looked at me. He took a small box out of his jacket and gave it to me. It was light enough that I knew what it was before I opened it. There was a watch inside with a cheap metal band. It was the kind of watch you buy at the last minute because you think you should bring something. Lizzie smiled and replied, "We're proud of you, too, son." It was the same tone that someone uses when they remember to thank a waiter. I stared at the car, then the watch, and then the watch again. I didn't think about what I was going to say next. It just happened. "I guess I'll get to work on time." It wasn't really loud. It wasn't mad. Just a statement that hit the mark perfectly. Liz's face shifted for a single second. Not wrath, not displeasure, not even fear. It was like I had uttered something I shouldn't have known. Like I had touched a wire she had been taped over for years. Her eyes were wide and keen, and they were riveted on mine. And for a split second, she looked naked. It went away after that. She set her jaw and stiffened her mouth. "Why do you constantly have to do this?" She lost it. "You can't allow one moment be all about your brother." Walter stepped in right away. Said I was creating a fuss. Said this wasn't the right time. Said I always had to change things into something they weren't. People around us pretended not to listen, but they were very clearly listening. Conversations nearby slowed down, and phones turned slightly in our direction. Trinity didn't say a word. She just stood next to me, steady, and brushed my arm once with her hand, not to stop me, but to remind me that I wasn't standing there alone. Ross looked back and forth between us, confused. He didn't utter a word. He was still holding the keys and carefully turning them over, as if he didn't know where to place them or what to do next. I didn't say anything. I put the watch box in my pocket after closing it. I really meant it when I said congratulations to Ross. After that, I turned around and left with Trinity. At that point, something inside me turned off. Not mad, not sad, simply clear. I stopped expecting things to be fair. I stopped believing that hard work would eventually pay off. I stopped believing that things would become better if I did enough. My parents pretended as nothing had happened in the days that followed. A text message about dinner plans. A query concerning whether I had already set up the watch. Walter emailed Ross links regarding car enhancements, as if graduation had only been for one of us. When I needed to, I answered. No tone, no openings, and short answers. It was meant to be the beginning of something after graduation. It did, but not in the way they imagined. My parents tried to sell it as a reset on New Year's Eve, 6 months later. The party on New Year's Eve was supposed to be a place where everyone could get along. That's how Lizzie sold it. 2 family, 1 house, a fresh start, no drama, just food, noise, and counting down like everyone else. There were a lot of people at Walter and Liz's house. Family members I hardly ever talked to. People who could remember Ross's numbers better than my work title. Kids running from one room to another. The music is very loud. Everyone had plates they didn't really desire. I thought the point was that it was too loud to have a true conversation. Trinity kept close to me. She was familiar with these kinds of things. The ring was in my jacket pocket, and it was heavier than it should have been for something so small. I had thought about this 100 times. When to do it and where to stand. I wasn't worried about what she would say. I was honest about my parents. Lizzie drew Trinity aside about an hour later. I saw right away. Lizzie didn't say anything. She casually leaned in, put her hand on Trinity's elbow, and led her to the kitchen like it was nothing. I stayed where I was and watched Ross talk to his uncle about employment. Trinity came back 10 minutes later. Same look, calm, no fury. She waited until we were close to the hallway and whispered in a low voice, "Your mom says you can be hard." She said it like a warning. I nodded. Yeah, that makes sense. She inquired whether I was okay. I told her I was, and I was. I believed I was. Walter clinked a glass. The music was loud and harsh. Everyone looked. I didn't plan on making a toast yet, but Walter did. He was in the middle of the living room with his arm around Ross's shoulders. He grinned a lot, more than he needed to. He talked about family, growth, the future year, and how proud he was of Ross's discipline, stability, and direction. He said that term twice. He never once said my name. People nodded their heads. Some people clapped early. Lizzie smiled like this was the best part of the night. Ross seemed uneasy, but he didn't draw away. Some people just know how to build something solid, Walter said at the end. That was my cue. I wasn't waiting for the room to come back to me. I moved forward before the applause stopped. I didn't speak loudly. I didn't get authorization. I took Trinity's hand, got down on one knee, and pulled out the ring. It was as if everyone in the room was waiting to see what would happen when it got quiet. Walter had had just enough to drink to make his confidence louder than his common sense. Lizzie gasped and stepped forward before Trinity could even react. Walter sped up. He grasped my wrist hard as he reached down. He snapped, "What are you doing?" I gently rose up and pulled my hand back. "Proposing." Walter chuckled once, in a sharp, nasty way. "No, you aren't." Lizzie jumped in. Walter interrupted me off and said, "This isn't right. You don't do this here. You don't have the right to use this family's name like that. You have nothing to offer her." He pointed at Ross without even looking at him. "Yes, he does." Ross finally said something then. "What the hell are you talking about?" Lizzie waved goodbye to him. "Not now." Ross moved forward. "No, not just now. You're making fools of yourselves." Walter didn't pay any attention to him and turned back to me. "You want to be a husband? You can't even keep up with your brother. Do you think love is enough to make up for stability?" The place started to buzz as individuals whispered and took out their phones. I saw my cousin Lara near the couch, already holding her phone up. Her eyes were bright as if she had been waiting for something to happen all night. Ross spoke louder. "Stop, both of you. This is crazy," Lizzie said back. Ross responded, "Don't take his side. I'm on the right side." Walter told him to be quiet since he was out of line. He told him he was being rude. Said I was destroying the evening. I glanced at Trinity. She hadn't changed. She was so serene that everything else seemed silly. I said one thing. "We're going now." I didn't wait for a reply. I held Trinity's hand and led her outside. There were voices behind us that were all over each other. Lizzie is yelling. Walter yelling to someone to stop us. Ross is arguing. Lara is recording everything. My phone was already lighting up by the time we reached home. Lara had put the video up as an actual thing. Wrote something about family drama and added a laughing emoji. It spread more quickly than I thought it would. There were a lot of comments. People were addressing my parents by name and questioning why they would do that to their kid. Walter and Lizzie went crazy online. They wrote long lines back, accusing me of leaving them, forsaking family, and making themselves look like sad parents whose kid turned on them in public. The family group chat went crazy. Aunts, uncles, and cousins are all giving their opinions. Some people are telling me to say I'm sorry. Some people think that both sides were wrong. A few acting like they didn't see anything odd. I didn't say anything. I didn't stand up for myself. I quit the chat, banned numbers, and updated my settings. My phone was quiet at the end of the night. That was the end of any interaction. I didn't tell anyone I was going to stop talking to them. I didn't send a last message or give an explanation. I just went away. I deleted my online accounts and changed my phone number. I just left one line available for Ross. No one else understood. I set up my email so that anything from my parents went straight to a place I never opened. I didn't look at it. When you choose to stay quiet, it's not dramatic. Things got silent quickly. Work, train, sleep, and do it all over again. I got additional hours. Got a better job when it came up. I started making choices without asking anyone who felt they owned me first. Through it all, Trinity stayed strong. She didn't see the lack of interaction as a problem or a phase. She didn't make me talk about my mom and dad. She didn't pretend they weren't there either. She paid attention when I brought them up. She let it go if I didn't. That was more important than comfort ever could be. The mess went away. Routine took over. The morning stayed early. Training stayed the same. The evening was peaceful. For the first time, I felt like my life was mine and not something I had to do because someone else wanted me to. We went to her parents' house for her birthday a few months after we started dating. Not a lot of frills. Dinner at home, dessert from a nearby store. Her parents were typical, yet in a way that still surprised me. They wanted to know about work. They heard the answers. No rankings or comparisons. I asked Trinity to come outside with me after dinner, when things quieted down and her parents went into the kitchen. No crowd, no toast, and no breaks. This time, I didn't get down on one knee. I still want this, just without an audience that hates me, I said as I gave her the ring. She laughed once and then replied yes like it wasn't a question. That was all. No chaos, no commentary, just a moment that didn't need to be defended. We didn't put it up immediately away. We told the folks who needed to know. Life went on without any noise. Of a year later, I heard of Ross's engagement by chance. A coworker recalled seeing something online and inquired if that was my brother. I checked once. One picture is already going around. Ross stood close to his fiancée and smiled in a way that appeared real. I didn't get an invitation. I didn't question it at first. In a way, it made sense. Since New Year's, we hadn't talked much. I thought Ross had made his choice. It hurt, but not enough to open anything up again. I had already accepted that distance was the price of calm. Ross called a week later. I almost didn't pick up. I picked up because I was curious, not because I hoped. He said, "Hey." He sounded nervous. That was different. I told him he had 5 minutes. He didn't say anything. He told me why I wasn't invited to the party for the engagement. Walter and Lizzie had worked hard. Remarked that inviting me would send the wrong message. Said it would cause trouble. Said it would take the focus away from Ross's moment. They said it was for protection. Ross went along with it, but not because he agreed. He was frozen. Same behaviors, same stress. He remarked, "I hated myself for it. I should have called you right away." I let him speak. He didn't make it easier. He didn't make excuses for it. He said he was sorry. Straightforward and clean. I trusted him. I told him I would think the worst. That bit was my fault. I told him I wasn't mad. I was sleepy. There is a distinction. He wanted to know whether we could meet. I agreed, but not in either of our homes. We had coffee together. There were no parents and no noise in the background. 2 grown guys are seated across from each other, and no one is in charge of the conversation. Ross talked more than I thought he would on how the proposal incident opened something up. How it felt to witness my parents embarrass me in public was different than how it felt to hear them do it in private. How hard it was for him to defend me at first and how much it bothered him after that. He stated he felt the pressure was typical. I didn't know how much of it utterly missed me. I didn't let go of years of anger. I didn't have to. He wasn't begging for forgiveness for what he had done. He was in charge of the present. I told him what was true. He wasn't to blame for any of this. He didn't make the rules. He only got something out of them. That didn't make him an enemy. It made him a person. He looked like he was relieved, as if he had been holding something heavy without knowing what it was. We didn't give each other a hug. We shook hands. That seemed right. We communicated from time to time after that. No closeness that isn't wanted. No acting as the past never happened. Just being honest and giving each other space. That's when I finally got my mind straight. I stopped thinking of Ross as our parents' son. He wasn't the reason I was ignored as a child. He was basically raised in a safe environment. Life kept calm. Okay, be quiet. Trinity and I were able to move forward without any problems. Our plan kept the same. Choices stayed clear. My past and my future were not at odds for the first time. We wanted the wedding to be small on purpose. Trinity and I didn't want a crowd that seemed like a duty. We wanted people who knew us, not people who needed to be wowed. There weren't many guests. Friends who had been around long enough to know the real us. Her parents and a few relatives on our side who didn't ask strange inquiries. That was it. Ross and Lara. Walter and Lizzie weren't asked to come. There was no question about that. No announcement, no reason. An invitation is a gift, not something you have to have. They had lost that a long time ago. There was no haste on the day itself. Trinity seemed so comfortable that everything else seemed to slip away. Her parents acted like I was already part of the family. No talks regarding the family's legacy. No one said anything about what I owed them. Ross came early. It wasn't awkward for him. Did not act like a middleman. He shook my hand, said congratulations, and stated that Trinity seemed delighted. He really meant it. That was enough. The ceremony was not very fancy. There were no extended vows that tried to heal old hurts or dramatic pauses. We made promises that were important and then moved on. I felt lighter than I thought I would when it was over. Not because I got something, but because I didn't have to protect it. We didn't post anything that day. People kept their phones in their pockets. The end of the night was silent. Lara changed that. She put up pictures from the wedding a few days later. Not with bad intent, but not with good intent either. Lara was just being Lara, staying in the moment and letting everything else burn. The posts went viral. People noticed who wasn't there. Comments began to pile up. There were more questions. Walter and Lizzie found out through Instagram. It got loud then. They didn't miss me, thus their reaction had nothing to do with it. It was all about being seen. The comments really hurt. Why weren't you there for your son's wedding? What type of parents didn't see that? Is this the first time this has happened? They answered in public with extensive, defensive justifications, vague comments about misunderstandings and boundaries. They made it sound like they had been pushed out, that they were victims of a son who had turned cold. It didn't work. People still remembered the video from New Year's. Screenshots came back. Clips got reposted. People started writing comments about Liz that included terms she detested. At first, Walter attempted to laugh it off, but then he got mad and then desperate. They moved to private messages when public sympathy didn't show up. I got texts, emails, and calls from numbers I didn't know. Guilt wrapped in concern. Anger that looked like sadness. They said I had embarrassed them, degraded the family, and left them when they needed me the most. They never asked me if I was pleased. I didn't say anything. I didn't block straight away either. I let it build up and watched the same thing happen again and again without me. After that, I blocked everything and went back to my normal life. Trinity didn't ask me why I was quiet. She didn't need to be reassured. She read the texts before I blocked them. She read enough to know what kind of individuals we were dealing with. She remarked once that they were angry they weren't spotted. That was all. No analysis, no comforting words, just the reality. This time, the internet didn't let them off the hook either. People are leaving more comments and asking more questions. They are detecting trends and old memories are pouring out from relatives who had been silent before. Lara kept posting, giving it food without even trying. Walter and Lizzie went crazy. You could tell by how their messages changed. 1 minute angry, the next begging. One email said I wasn't thankful. The next one begged me to remember all the things they had done for me. I didn't pay any attention to it. The silence came back. This time, it worked. A few evenings after things calmed down, my phone rang. Ross's name was mentioned. I replied. He said, "Hey." He didn't sound scared. He sounded serious. That caught my eye. I asked what was happening. He stopped for a second before saying, "It's about Mom and Dad. Something has happened. Dad wants to talk to you. He says it's important." I didn't answer straight away. Lizzie didn't have a big public breakdown. No scene, no cameras. She fell down at home and didn't get back up quickly enough for anyone to act like it was nothing. The paramedics said things that no one loves. Heart rate, risk of stroke, and surveillance. Tests took place overnight. Tests evolved into that kind of calm that only happens when doctors stop speculating and start measuring. She didn't call me. She told Ross to do it. Ross called that night late. He spoke steadily, yet there was something in his voice that I had never heard before. Don't panic. Hold on. She's in the hospital? He continued. She asked for you. Dad wants to talk, too. They're saying it's important. I didn't answer right away. Is this an apology thing? Ross responded, no, and then he stopped. This is different. Ross doesn't wait. That break was important. I told him I will come once. One visit, no commitments, and no follow-up talks. He didn't fight. Okay, he said. Be quiet. Trinity drove with me. She didn't tell me to forgive or go on. She didn't try to get me ready for anything. We parked, stepped inside, and halted at the door of Liz's floor. She held my hand tightly once. I'm right here. That was everything I needed. In the hospital bed, Lizzie seemed smaller. Not delicate, just tiny. Like someone who was too tired to care about how they looked anymore. Walter stood with his arms folded beside the window, looking out as if the city possessed answers. Ross stood beside the door, stiff, as if he already knew that whatever was coming would hurt him. Lizzie didn't waste any time. She said, I don't have much time. I sat there. And I don't want to die with this inside me. That told me all I needed to know. It wasn't about me. She didn't want to carry it anymore. She took a deep breath. We only wanted one kid. Walter didn't glance at me. He nodded his head. That was the plan all along. Lizzie went on. We could handle one pregnancy, one future, and one life. Ross made a face. What do you mean? Lizzie stated. We panicked when the doctor said there were twins. We didn't talk about it like a blessing. We talked about our options. I said nothing. Selective termination. She didn't make things easier. Ross took a fast breath in. Walter finally responded, his voice calm and clinical. You're kidding. The experts talked about the risks. Several consultations. You were found to be hemodynamically necessary. If you lost him, you would probably lose him too. The words were ugly and cold. Lizzie gulped. You were shorter. The physicians stated you were weaker physically. Ross looked at me. What does that mean? Walter's remarks sounded like he was reading a report. He was giving important blood flow and sharing nutrients. Killing him would have hurt the stronger fetus. Ross stopped moving. You mean me? Lizzie nodded her head. So, Ross said softly. He saved my life. Yes, she said in a whisper. It felt like the air had gotten thicker in the room. At that point, Lizzie started to cry. Not loud or theatrical, just tears running down her face and her hands shaking. She said to me, every time I looked at you, I remembered what we almost did and what we would have done. I stayed quiet. No shaking. There was no flash of rage. Things just fell into place. The correction instead of affection. The stress. The way she touched me like I would break anything just by being there. Walter coughed. We are sorry that things turned out this way. I looked at him. That's all. Lizzie took my hand. I stepped back so she couldn't touch me. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. I eventually said something. What are you sorry for? She blinked. I shook my head for everything. No, be clear. She had a hard time. I let a beat go by because of how we handled you. Sorry I was caught. Or sad the web saw it. Or sorry you had to speak it out loud before something worse happened. Walter lost it. That's not right. I looked at him. You made my life into a medical function. 5 minutes ago. Don't say anything to me about fair. Ross then spoke, his voice strained. I had no idea. I promise I didn't know. I answered, I know. And I meant it. Now Lizzie was crying even more. She said, I didn't know how to love you. I was scared of you. Every time I saw you, I worried about what may have occurred. That was the most honest thing she'd ever spoken to me. I didn't speak loudly. I told you I wasn't your hard son. I was your bandage. Walter opened his mouth. I didn't let him talk. And suddenly the string is cut. After that, no one said anything. The machines even seemed quieter. I took a step back toward the door. Ross looked like he wanted to stop me, say something important, or fix something that couldn't be remedied. I shook my head once. Lizzie said my name in a low voice. I didn't say anything. I left. Trinity stood up as soon as she noticed me. She didn't want to know what happened. She didn't look closely at my face. We departed after she put her arm around me. When I left the hospital, I didn't feel broken. I felt like I was done. Like something had finally been named and put down. So, let me ask you something. What would you do if you found out that you weren't kept because you were loved or even liked, but because you were needed? If everything that happened to you as a child suddenly made sense in the worst manner, would you forgive them because they are sorry now? Would you keep in touch with folks who only cared about you when you could help someone else stay alive? Or would you leave and start again with something better? I picked distance. I picked the life I already made, and I'm glad I did. If you like this video, please click the subscribe button. It definitely helps the channel and us get you more and better stories. Thanks.